Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am Sachin, and I'm part of the Josh family. Today, what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to my talk today is going to be a practical guide on how to integrate your Rails application with a native mobile device, native mobile application. And I'll also show you how to test your changes. Now, but why do we need this talk? We are using Rails and we are using responsive design. Then why do we need a native mobile application? But my friends, responsive designs are not a replacement of a native mobile application. And with the pace at which the mobile users are growing, it is becoming very important to have native applications for all your web applications. Right? You agree or not? Examples, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, they all have native apps now. They're the most popular websites, but they have their native apps. So with the same, recently this talk is inspired from one of the practical problems that we came into where we had a website up and running, and there was a need where we had to add a support for native mobile app. So I'll walk you through the steps you need to follow, and then you know how to verify that your application is up and running. So before we get into that, let's see a sample application. Okay, so I have this sample application. This is built in Rails, a standard Rails application, which lets users sign in using your sign up, or it will let you sign in using any of the social networks. Guys at the back, can you see this? Okay, all right. So there are two ways of signing into a system. So let us see, so there are users. So I've taken, for example, I've taken 3 users. One is signing in using the native login. So this application essentially lets the user to maintain their wish list of books they want to read. All right? So this user, who is a native user of the application, is a great fan of Harry Potter. There is another user of the system who perhaps wants to read books written by Dr. Kalam. And there is a third user of the system who wants to read books written by Jeremiah Stilton. Anybody knows about this writer? Kids at home? There you go. Right. So this is a very, very famous writer and very famous among youngsters. They're a big fan of this. So they're essentially in the system, there are 3 types of users. One, so let me go back to my slide. There are users who can sign in using either Facebook or LinkedIn, and users who can sign in using who have registered on your system. I'm trying to emphasize this because this could become a problem where you're integrating your native mobile app. How? We will see in a short while. So as I said, this was inspired from one of the problems that we came across where we had to integrate it. And interestingly, this was the statistics of the usage. So the number of customers was not this, but essentially 30% users were native users, and rest 70% were using social networks for login. So we'll come back to this slide towards the end of the presentation, but this is very important to know because this may pose some problems. All right, so how do you solve this problem? Anybody who has done this before? Added support for native mobile apps? No one? Really? You've done it? Great, what did you do? Rolled out your own? Right. Essentially, so that's an interesting point, So let's first understand what do you mean by supporting native mobile apps. So by supporting native mobile apps, we mean that whatever action you can do from your browser, you should be able to do from native mobile app. So for example, here, if you can add a book or you can edit a book, okay, So for example, you know, are you guys able to see? I don't know why it's not letting me scroll, but anyway, let me see at the browser. Oh man, it doesn't show me. So there are edit and delete buttons as well at the end of this row. So it will let you edit a book, delete a book, or update a book. So all these actions you should be able to perform through your web application. Sorry, through your native app. So the only way to do it, as rightly pointed out, is adding RESTful APIs. And each RESTful API, it has to be authenticated because you have to serve data for individual users. So now has anybody done this after giving away the solution? There's one, okay, great, 2 people have done this. All right, so this is going to be very helpful for you guys because this is, you know, coming down the line. And you may at some point of time be required to do this. Okay, so before you add RESTful APIs, what you need to do is you need to add authentication to your system. And any API call, the only way to authenticate the APIs is authentication token. That's the only way you do it. I'm sure you must have guys, used developer networks from LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook. Anybody? How do you use it? Access tokens, right? Absolutely. So the only way to use APIs is using access tokens. So that's the first step what you need to follow. That's the first thing you need to do in your application. So how do you do that? The first thing is to add a migration for authentication token. So this is the first thing that you need to do. So add a migration, add the authentication token to your user model. And then you run the migration. So at this point you've got a placeholder for your access token. Right? Pretty straightforward, Rails code. Guys, you're able to see it? Okay. Now, what is the second step? Everybody is using device and OmniAuth, right? So you need to know it. So you can just use device and leverage this access token. If you are using an older version of device and you've got a chance to upgrade, what you need to do is you just need to use the token authenticatable module in your device and you're done. Everything will just work. But this is not going to work with later versions of device because this has been deprecated. So then what do? You write your own code what device authenticable does, token authenticable does. Essentially, there are 2 minimum methods that you will have to write. One is you have to ensure that the token is written into the system. The migration that we wrote, so you need to ensure that the token is written into that column, into the user table. And the second thing you need to ensure is you have to generate the authentication token. Can you see this straightforward Rails code, right? Okay. Here, the way I'm generating the authentication token is I'm just using a device-friendly token method, but you can make it very complicated and you can have a very secure token here. Right? So far, so good. Any questions? All right. Now you have the infrastructure set, you are creating a token, but I would recommend putting a little more security on top of it. So I would recommend adding a token expiry. So for example, here what I have done is I have put a token expiry of 2 weeks. In order to do that, what you need to do is you need to add one more migration to keep the token creation date, and then you need to create one more method to ensure that the token creation date is stored, and then the final one is reset or recreate an authentication token method. Right? If you have this in place, what you can do is when the user asks for the token, you can just check whether it is expired or not. If it is expired, you can either regenerate it if the user is authenticated or just decline the call. Right? I'll walk you through an example on how exactly this is done, and so that this becomes more clear. At the end of it, we are all set. What we need to do is we need to add this to all users. So this is going to work for new users, but what about existing users? You need to have the authentication token for existing users, right? So just go to your Rails console and say user.all and save the authentication token for the users. So you're all set now. So your authentication is in place. The second step, any questions until this point? All right, So the second step is to add RESTful APIs. Adding RESTful APIs, I'm not going to talk about in detail about how to add, because I think that's a separate topic itself for a presentation, but I'll walk through what I have done to add the RESTful APIs. At a very minimum, you would need to add a method, an API which says get token. You could call it whatever you want. It will take the credentials and return the access token that you have just added for each user. The second method is essentially to reset a token. Why do you need that? If you suspect a forgery, you can just go and reset your token, right? And the third one is you need to add CRUD APIs for your objects. So in the example that we saw, we need to add CRUD APIs for the books, right? Okay. All right, so let's see the methods that we've added, the RESTful APIs. So this is the get token method. What are we doing here? The first one is get user. We are taking the user. We check whether the authentication token is expired or not. If it is expired, we are just creating the token again, right? Are you guys with me here? Okay. And the second method was the reset token, which essentially is resetting the token. These methods have been added to the user model. So let's go and see those methods. Okay. So we're looking at the get token method and the reset method, right? Okay. The second one we wanted to talk about, we wanted to see the code for the CRUD APIs. So these are the CRUD APIs. So how have I added this? So there are two ways of adding APIs. Either you can build everything grounds up, add your controllers, models, everything, or you can leverage a framework which is available. What I have done is I have used the Grape API, Grape Gem, which is I think great. If you are using Grape, what you need to do is you need to add a folder with API. Under that you provide your version, v1, v2, whichever version of API you are in, and you need to add code under that. Boom. You just need to set one route and everything will just fall in place. You can go to the Grape's website and it has a great tutorial there. All right. So what I've done is I've added these CRUD APIs. So the first one is, so these are like straightforward, return the list of books, delete, create, and the last one is update. All right. So now we are all set with the APIs. Now let's see this working. How do you test your APIs? I don't have a mobile application. How do you test it? Sorry? Yes, perfect. I think that's the best way of doing it. You don't need a mobile application to do that. What you need is a REST client. So similarly, what I have done is I have a REST client here. I'm going to run each and every API and show it to you how it's going to work. This is weird. Okay, can you see this? So this is the way you, sorry. You need the first API you need to call is to get the token, right? So here you go. So you provide your login and password and you call the API by doing a post. This is becoming a big problem for me. Okay. So if you send this, what you get in response here is access token. Can you guys see the access token which is returned by the REST client? You need to use this access token in all your subsequent calls. Say for example, let's say we want to get details of, so you want to get the list of books. Okay. Let me just switch my, I think this is going to be a bit better. Okay. Okay guys, so you send this query and that is what you get in response, the list of books. Similarly, you can run your update and delete methods. All right? So once you're set with the APIs, you can test your APIs this way. However, will this work for clients who have logged in using Facebook and LinkedIn? Will this technique work for those cases? Why? Somebody said no. Why it's not going to work for those cases? Yes, that's correct. Absolutely, that's the right answer. So what do you do then? Before this, for everybody to understand, let's see the difference. When we are talking about a standard mobile application which is accessing, what you do is the mobile application sends you the get token API call, sending the credentials. In response, the Rails server sends you the authentication token. The mobile application then calls any of the get data APIs, passing the authentication token, and in response gets the data, right? However, when you have a Facebook or LinkedIn login, what is going to happen is your mobile application is not going to send the authentication to your Rails server. It's going to send the authentication to the provider, which is Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. The way you implement it is using the SDKs that are required, that are provided by Facebook and LinkedIn, and these SDKs directly talk with the Facebook APIs to authenticate the user. So in this case, what is going to happen is the mobile app is going to talk to the Facebook application, get the user authenticated. But then how do you ensure that you return the data of the user from your Rails application? Any solutions here? He has told that the problem is that you get the access token from Rails, but you can't store that because it's on the mobile app. You need to get that information from your backend server. How do you get that? It's actually very simple. We use the same method, we use the access token and the secret token, what is sent by the provider. You send that to your Rails server. On the Rails server, you authenticate the UID and the access token, and based on that, you check the user in your database and return the user. Does this make sense? Because the UID is what is stored in your database. Device stores the UID in your database, right? So you take the UID, validate it against the access token and access secret, verify the user, and send the data back. This is a very important step you need to do, because if you can't just do on the basis of UID, because UID is something which is in the public network. I can send you a UID and get your data. So you have to validate the user based on the access token. Right? And this is like very straightforward to do. So what happens when you get the request from the user? Say for example, the user is logging using Facebook. So what you do is you call the Facebook API, which is graphfacebook.me. You pass the access token, get the data of the user. When you get the data, you pull out the UID from that data, and you validate against the UID that the user has sent from the API. If that matches, you authenticate the user and return the data for that user. Similarly for LinkedIn, LinkedIn is a little complicated because it sends you two key parameters. One is a key and one is a secret token. So what you need to do is when you call the LinkedIn APIs, you need to pass both these values to get the user data. So you can get that, you can validate the user's UID, and you can return the data for LinkedIn. If you do this, everything will seamlessly work. That's it.